In a once peaceful small town, lived a boy named Jacob with his family. His parents often left for business trips, leaving Jacob alone at home on weekends. One night, while his family was away on a weekend trip, Jacob found himself alone. Although he was used to this, as the night grew deeper, he began to feel uneasy. That night, while watching a movie to pass the time, Jacob suddenly heard noises from somewhere in the house. Initially thinking it was just the old house creaking, the sound seemed to grow closer to his room. Gathering his courage, he grabbed a flashlight and decided to investigate the source of the noise. As Jacob went downstairs and along the corridor, the noises became clearer and sounded like footsteps. His heart pounded, and the flashlight trembled in his hand. Reaching the end of the hallway, he realized the sounds were coming from a window left ajar, with the curtains fluttering in the wind. Though he felt relieved for a moment, he then felt as if something was watching him from behind. Turning around, he found no one there. Only an eerie silence filled the room. Driven by fear, Jacob dashed back to his room, locked the door, and tried to call for help, only to find his phone's battery dead. He looked out the window for any sign of help but found the town eerily quiet. Jacob barely slept until his family returned home in the morning, to whom he recounted the night's events. They immediately contacted the police, who conducted a thorough search of the house and its surroundings. The police discovered an old basement hidden behind the house, which turned out to be a secret hideout used by someone who had lived there before. Inside the basement, they found food supplies, clothes, and a small escape route. This discovery instilled deep fear in Jacob and his family, suggesting that the person who had broken into their home might still be lurking nearby. The family promptly upgraded their security system and sealed off the entrance to the basement. However, since that night, Jacob has continued to feel anxious about being alone. He began to check every corner of the house at night, ensuring all windows and doors were securely locked. Even weeks after the incident, the family lived with a sense of tension. Weeks later, the police informed the family that the person who had broken into their home was arrested in a nearby house. It was revealed that this person had lived in Jacob's house before the family moved in and had continued to hide in the basement secretly. Upon arrest, he was found with stolen items but claimed he had no intention of harming Jacob's family. The incident shocked not only Jacob's family but also the entire community. The family took further steps to enhance their home's security and actively participated in neighborhood watch programs. Jacob felt that the event had forever changed his perception of safety. He became acutely aware of the potential dangers lurking close to home, living with constant vigilance. This tale of fear serves as a profound reminder of what safety means in our daily lives and how easily our sense of security can be breached. A home should be a place of safety and comfort, but this story shows how an unexpected visitor can easily violate that peace. Just like Jacob and his family experienced, even our own homes can become places of unknown terror, a fact we must not forget. My new life began in a single room of an old apartment, coinciding with my entrance to university and marking the first time I'd lived on my own. Situated on the outskirts of a quiet town, the apartment represented a symbol of new freedom and independence for me. However, one weekend, while my parents were away on a family visit, I found myself alone and unexpectedly confronted with a night of unforeseen terror. As the night quietly deepened, I was at my desk studying when I began to hear strange sounds from the next room. Initially, I thought it might be just the wind or the creaking of the old building, but the sounds soon took on a clear rhythm, repeating with an eerie regularity. Drawn by this odd noise, I resolved to investigate its source. Upon entering the adjacent room, I was met with a chill in the air of what was usually just a storage space, expected to be empty. However, as my gaze fell towards the windowsill, I discovered indentations on the wall as if something had been striking it from the inside. In that moment, a door quietly closed behind me, prompting me to turn around. There, on the floor, lay an old photograph, dropped seemingly out of nowhere. It was of a girl who had reportedly lived in this apartment before vanishing decades ago. The girl in the photo seemed to be staring back at me, as if pleading for something. Suddenly, the tapping sounds resumed, and this time, they were accompanied by a girl's voice calling for help. The voice seemed to come from both afar and near at the same time, sending shivers down my spine. Filled with fear and confusion, I was unsure of what was happening or what I should do. All I knew was that I dreaded hearing that voice again. As the long, quiet night finally gave way to dawn, I mustered the courage to check the room once more. However, I found nothing out of the ordinary. Since then, whenever I am alone, I often feel haunted by the whispers of a forgotten voice, a constant reminder that invisible terrors always lurk close by. In our daily lives, we must accept the reality that the events of the past and the fears experienced by people do not simply fade away over time. Instead, they persist in this world in some form. The cries of unseen entities suggest the existence of another world hidden behind the safety of our everyday lives. Since that night, despite returning to my studies and daily routines, the event has continued to whirl in the depths of my mind. As time passed, I became convinced that my experience was not merely a hallucination or a figment of my imagination. Something had been there in that room, trying to communicate with me. Torn between curiosity and fear, I set out to unravel this mystery. I began researching the apartment's past, digging through local library archives and online resources. During this process, I learned about an unresolved disappearance case that occurred decades ago in this apartment. The missing girl turned out to be the same one from the photograph. While the incident had once shocked the local community, it had faded into obscurity over time, becoming a forgotten piece of the past. To me, however, the case was not just a matter of the past but a continuing reality. The voice I heard that night could have been the missing girl's. The thought that she might have been reaching out to me for help was heart-wrenching. Further investigation led me to gather information suggesting that the girl was last seen near this apartment and that she had appeared frightened. These details eerily matched my own experience that night. Despite my findings, when I attempted to contact the police, I was told that too much time had passed for a new investigation to be launched. Undeterred, I reached out to the girl's family to share my experience. They had lived with unanswered questions for so long but were grateful to feel her presence through my story. This experience has become unforgettable for me, teaching me that we possess the ability to sense the unseen and that the events of the past continue to live within us. The voice of the missing girl imparted a crucial lesson even forgotten beings, when someone listens to their cries, can bridge the past and the present, shedding light on unresolved mysteries. Her voice reaching me was no coincidence. Perhaps it was meant to serve a purpose.
This happened to me just a few weeks ago, and it hasn't left my memory since. I'm 20 years old and just moved into a small apartment complex a few miles from my parents. I've never lived alone before, so this whole situation was pretty new to me. The complex was 3 stories tall and had 6 total apartments. The only one that was available was on the top floor, so that's the one I had to go with. Anyway, I finally got everything in and was able to relax for a little bit before bed. I think the time was around 10 p.m., but I still had to set up my bed and eat dinner. The only thing I really had to eat was ramen, so I started the stove and put a pot of water on top to boil. As I was waiting, I heard the floor in front of my apartment creak softly. I wasn't sure at first if the complex just made noises or if someone was actually at my door. Either way, I figured I should just check in case someone was there. I opened the door slowly. "Hello," I said softly, as there was an older man standing a few feet from my door with his back facing me. I assumed he lived in the neighboring apartment, as the door was directly in front of mine, which was where he was facing. A few seconds went by, and he turned softly and said,
"Sorry."
then began to walk down the stairs. I closed the door and checked on the pot of water. I started to feel a little bit uneasy, mostly because he didn't go into the neighboring room. There would be no reason for anyone to come up to the top floor unless you lived there. Anyway, I finished making the ramen and tried not to think about it too much. I was just excited to finally have my own place and live alone for once. This was a big accomplishment for me, and I didn't want to be creeped out for my first night. So, I finished making my bed and turned all the lights off. I stayed up on my phone for a little bit before eventually dozing off. I want to say I fell asleep around 11 or 12, but I am not too sure. However, I do remember reading the clock at 1:29 when I woke up after hearing something from the room below mine. It sounded like a soft shuffling of footsteps. I laid there waiting to hear anything else. It took maybe 5 minutes before I heard the creaking floor from outside my room again. I was beginning to panic a little, running through my mind over and over to try and remember if I had locked the door after opening it earlier that night. As I waited in silence, I heard the subtle clicking sound of the doorknob trying to turn. It was locked. I waited for anything further to happen, but after a few seconds, I heard the neighbor's door open and then shut. Relieved, I got out of bed and quickly double-checked to make sure my front door was locked, then I went back to bed. I figured it must have been the old man who had possibly just gotten confused as to which door was his. When morning came, a loud knock came at my front door. I was greeted by 2 police officers. They asked me if I had experienced anything unusual last night or if anything was missing. Apparently, a man had robbed 2 apartments last night, both having forgotten to lock their doors. I told the officers everything, and they thanked me and walked back downstairs. I am not sure if they found the man or not, but nothing happened since. Just thinking about the whole situation makes me really uneasy, and I can't help but wonder what would have happened if I had forgotten to lock the door that night.